Dick Brennan is one of the top anchors here, and he's also a political junkie. So who better to talk about the top political story of the week, the Georgia indictment of former President Donald Trump? Dick, why do you think this case could be more perilous for former President Trump than any of the other indictments?
Probably more than anything else, one word: pardon, pardon, pardon. President Trump, if he indeed was convicted in this case in Georgia, he couldn't be pardoned because it's a local case, and therefore a presidential pardon wouldn't apply. Now, if, let's say, this was a federal case, he was president, theoretically, he could get a pardon from a president. Now, even this is all extremely questionable because nobody has really said that a president of the United States could pardon themselves. But that's one reason why Trump should be worried. The second thing is that it's a RICO case, and we've all talked about this over the last few days.
Racketeering case.
Racketeering case. It essentially means that Trump or the people who were indicted with him were part of a whole network, an enterprise, a criminal enterprise. This is what the prosecutors say, that he's part of a criminal enterprise, and therefore what one person did, you were also responsible for. And therefore it's easy for prosecutors to link into one giant crime. And theoretically, at least, it might be easier to get a conviction, but there are also problems with that.
Well, tell me what the problems are.
Well, the problems are, generally, the defense is, hey, I'm the president. What did I know that so-and-so was calling so-and-so? I didn't know anything about that allegation in the crime. And they could say, hey, yeah, that's fair. But the whole idea of RICO, or the racketeering thing, it was designed, really was designed for the mob. And back in the 80s, when someone we know, Rudy Giuliani, was going after the mob, it was designed because all of these mobsters could say that. They could say, hey, what did I know about one of these guys, one of these hoods doing a crime out of Kennedy Airport? I had nothing to do with it. But if you say, wait a minute, your organization is a criminal organization and you're the top person, well, then you're all linked together.
And we should point out that Rudy Giuliani, the then U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, took the RICO statute, applied it to white-collar crime, and got a lot of people, in addition to organized crime figures, because he was able to say, use this whole thing, which is sort of interesting that they're now turning the RICO statute against him and his role in this whole conspiracy.
And Fulton County DA Fani Willis has been using it because many states have adopted it. In fact, she has a few cases going on now, but there are also interesting aspects to those cases because they tend to move very slowly. There are 19 co-defendants in this Georgia case that includes Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows. 19. She was asked at a press conference, will you try them together? She said yes, and everybody kind of rolled their eyes and said, really? But she's doing that right now in other cases. That would slow this whole process down, and that's going to be an issue.
Well, see, do you think that there's going to be motions, and I think Mark Meadows has already made one, to try to move it out of the state court into the federal courts so that if there was a possibility of a presidential pardon, it could be used?
There's a word we're going to hear a lot lately. It's called remove, and that's what you're talking about, Marcia. Remove the case from the local jurisdiction to the federal jurisdiction. Mark Meadows, according to legal analysts, I'm not one of them, I'm just someone who covers this stuff, but according to legal analysts, he may have a strong case because what the law essentially says, that if you committed the action or the crime under the guise of your job, okay, you were the federal official doing this as a federal official, well then this belongs in federal court. Well, you say, well, what about Donald Trump? Well, then he should be able to say the same thing. Ah, well, that's a little trickier.
Why?
Because at least the prosecutors would say, you weren't doing your job. You were breaking the law. You were trying to overturn something. Trump would say, wait, I thought a crime was being committed. I thought the election was being stolen. And therefore, of course, I was just doing my job. So that's going to be the fight. Legal analysts would say Meadows has a better shot than Trump does because Trump theoretically should be on top, and he would be making that judgment.
Also, we should point out that this has to do with a charge of trying to overthrow an election in Georgia and the hunt for finding 11,780 votes.
Just one more. Just one more. And then now, Trump, you know, he always, when he talks about things, I mean, that could be interpreted two ways. You could say, oh, the prosecutors say, look, this is proof. He would say, look, oh, come on, I just said I needed another vote. I didn't mean that literally. I'm overturning elections. So there's always that fine line, and he always seems to walk right up to it sometimes.
But see, here's the other thing that's sort of interesting to me. So in the Manhattan case that involved Stormy Daniels, there was also a motion to remove it from the state court and bring it to the federal court, and the judge in the federal court turned it down and said, no, it belongs in state court. So how would that be different from what's going on in their motions in Georgia?
Well, here's the issue right now of that case is that the bigger issue for that case right now is when they're going to try it. Because when you look at that case, some would say, well, it involves falsifying business records, the payment to Stormy Daniels, a porn star, and these other cases, you have 2 federal cases and 1 local case, involve arguably much bigger issues, the overturning of an election, the stealing of classified documents. So that case may have to get in line behind 3 other cases, and I know we were going to talk about the whole idea of having 4 separate cases during a presidential election.
So that was the next question.
How did I know that, Marcia? I didn't even look. I didn't even look.
So will it be difficult for him to campaign for president while he faces 4 separate criminal actions and could have to make appearances in court?
Well, listen, you know, Donald Trump, every time we try to figure out what Donald Trump will do or won't do, we scratch our heads. Would he make the whole idea of being in court part of a fundraising gimmick or part of a campaign?
Oh, my God, yes.
You think he would? Right. So even the fact of maybe him sitting in court, he's sitting there saying, hey, wow, you know, I'm being persecuted. My supporters are going to say I'm being persecuted.
So this is the best way to campaign.
Well, I didn't say that. I'm just saying it's possible that Donald Trump might see it that way. And sometimes a lot of people who work with Donald Trump says he makes it up as he goes along. So perhaps he doesn't even know either. I don't think he does.
So let me ask you this question. There's a Republican debate next week where he hasn't said he's going to go. He hasn't said he's not going to go. What's the over-under about going or not going?
Well, I'll give you the smart and not smart. The smart says, you're crazy to go. What, are you kidding me? You're going to have all these candidates beating up on you coming off another indictment, okay? But then there's Donald Trump, and Donald Trump says, I could have a field day with this. And the other thing, and Chris Christie has said that, one of those candidates who was just dying to get Donald Trump on the stage. He says he wants to do Jersey on him. You know, that's what Chris Christie says. He said Donald Trump will not be able to stay away because he's going to be watching it on TV, and he's going to wait, and he'll only be able to put things on Truth Social. And they asked Chris Christie, okay, what would you say about him if he doesn't show up? He says, coward. Okay, and you get the feeling that Christie knows that that's trying to get at Trump's goat.
Yeah, but he's trying to get Trump to show up.
He is trying to get Trump to, but he's also trying, that's, the Christie campaign is all about essentially trying to get Trump off his game and to show I could out-Trump Trump.
So we have about a minute left. I have to bring up Rudy Giuliani. I'm sorry, it's only a minute. But one of the pundits we've talked to, O'Brien Murray, who worked for Giuliani when he ran for mayor, says because of the indictment, he'll be great on the campaign trail campaigning for Trump. Your take on that?
Listen, that to me might be strange because Rudy, as many people have said, he's appeared to have been erratic even during the last parts of the president's term, right? And some people said he fanned the flames and got President Trump into trouble in various places. So that's very questionable. And you got to wonder, we haven't heard much from Trump about Rudy lately in light of all these indictments. Some are saying he won't give him any money. Rudy needs money. I don't know. I think that's very questionable. But Rudy has always been around.
And we're going to have to leave it right there. Okay. We're going to have to deal more with Rudy Giuliani in the days and weeks to come, and we'll be right back.